Hey, what's going on? Welcome to AngularAir. I'm your host, Justin Schwarzenberger, and on today's episode, we are going to be talking ngAtlanta, a little bit about that conference, as well as get some insights into the entire web platform that kind of runs that conference. Should be pretty cool. So let's kick things off. Say hi to our panelists today. We got Mike Brocky. Mike, what's going on?
How's it going, Mr. Justin? Getting ready for the holidays and the end of the year.
Nice, nice. Aren't we all? I think. Cool. All right, and we got a couple guests today. One, Nathan Walker. Nathan, how's it going?
Hello, hello. It's good to be here. Friday before the holidays. It's always crazy.
Yes, yes. We got a theme going here. Zack Chapple. Zach, how's it going?
Fantastic. A little bit under the weather, if you can't tell by my voice, but happy for the holiday season and ready to end up a year of way too much traveling.
All right. You've got 1 hour to get you through, and then you can like rest your voice, rest your sinuses, all that stuff. So cool.
Awesome.
All right. So ngAtlanta, let's talk a little bit about that. Second year of the conference, right?
Yeah. It's our second year. We decided to kind of build on what we did last year. I don't know for everyone who wasn't there. We actually did something really cool in that we tried to kind of pull speakers from all over the world and give the audience a really good cross section of the tech industry. And one of the cool things that we did is we actually had 62% of our speakers last year were women in tech, which was something that I was really proud of, and it was actually one of our goals for the conference as a whole. And something we wanted to try and do again this year. And in the process of doing so, we made sure that we were pulling Google developer experts and people who were speaking before, but we kind of decided to pull them from all over the world. So we have speakers from Bulgaria and Colombia and Malaysia, and we're really bringing the world to Atlanta. And something that was really cool is that I looked at the speaker lineup and the stats around our speakers for 2019. And actually, as it sits right now, 67% of our speakers are women in tech, which so even better than what we had last year. And it really goes to show that that doing this is possible. But the other interesting thing is that we did it without repeating any of the speakers, which I thought was really cool too, because we're able to get a lot of new faces in front of the audience and really give a lot of people an opportunity to be on this platform. And a couple other things that are happening that are kind of new this year is one, we're doing a diversity roundtable with Tracy Lee and her team over at This Dot. So we're going to be pulling in a bunch of folks from around the Atlanta community and leaders that are coming to our conference and really getting their thoughts and feedback on what diversity means for them and kind of driving that conversation. And then we're going to be making some really cool announcements around the nonprofit that we started that was called the ngAtlanta Foundation, but is soon to be called the Paved Road, and how we're going to leverage paid apprenticeships to help catapult people into tech, and what kind of an opportunity that represents. So a lot going on.
Wow, yeah, definitely. How many speakers are there total? Do you know?
We have 27 speakers, not including the folks from Netflix and Front End Happy Hour. They're going to be doing something this year called the Sideshow, which I don't know if you ever watched the news or anything, but like so we have our talks that happen on stage, and usually at a conference you have this awkward 5 minutes in between the talks where you're just kind of staring at the speaker and staring at the next speaker, and you have an MC that sometimes comes out. And this year we decided, you know what, let's do something different. So we're going to have a stage to the side of the regular stage, and they're going to do a breakdown of the last talk and do some banter, and they're going to pass it over to Kim Maeda, who's our MC, and then she's going to do all the speaker intros and all that stuff. So it's going to be a little bit more dynamic of a conference. It's something I've never seen before, and actually I thought would be really exciting, and it helps us keep the community involved.
I like that because you have that downtime in between talks where you don't know what to do, and then you have the next speaker up on the stage awkwardly trying to set up, maybe run into some potential tech issues and everything else. Oh, I can't get my screen to present. What's going on? Without having a room full of eyes necessarily focused on that for that additional pressure to be able to get things
exactly.
That's a nice added thing, not just for the attendees, because that's great, because then you get some perspective about the talk that just happened, but also
Right.
For the next speaker.
Yep.
I like that.
Well, and the other problem we have a lot is like people will have questions, and so what we're doing is every 3 speakers, there's a coffee break or a lunch, right? So Jim and Ryan are going to interview the last 3 speakers and ask them the questions that were submitted. So during that 25 minutes, if you ask a question, go grab your coffee, come back in, and they're going to be answering the questions. So it also gives us a nice, kind of break from the talks, but at the same time lets us get the content and the questions answered. So that's really cool.
That's cool. How many days is it?
So it's 2 days of workshops and 2 days of conference. So the Wednesday is workshops. Thursday and Friday are the single track conference, and then Saturday is more workshops.
Very cool. Very cool. And when's that at? Next month?
Yeah, so it's 18 days away. So it's January 9th through 12th. We went a little early this year. We will probably not do that again next year. But we wanted to go a little bit early. It was either this week or Valentine's week. And I had a feeling that folks would not want to go to a conference on the week of Valentine's Day.
Are there still tickets available for the conference as well as the workshops?
Yeah, all the workshops still have a little bit of space. As usual, John Papa's usually sells out, so his got the least amount of space left. But yeah, we definitely still have tickets available. They're up on our site right now. So get them while you can. We're trying to get the space filled out and make it a really good crowd.
Very cool. Very cool. Is there any type of theme going on for the conference this year?
So the theme this year is you could sit with us. Last year we talked about diversity and inclusion in Angular was our theme last year. And this year we changed it to you could sit with us. That's a little bit more of the Angular team mantra. And at the same time we thought about we actually wanted to drop that from our tagline because the way we want to approach conferences is that by default our conferences should be diverse, and by default our conferences should be inclusive. And we wanted to treat it the same way hotels treat their rooms, right? You don't necessarily want to go to a hotel that highlights we now have clean beds, right? It should be the expectation that your room is clean, in the same way that it should be the expectation that your conference is diverse. And it doesn't mean you have to dilute the content or dilute the speakers or charge at a hugely discounted rate, because you don't want to devalue the speakers that you're bringing on stage either, right? The voices and the people that we have on stage are just as important as every other speaker you've seen at any Angular conference. They just might have a slightly different perspective than what you're used to.
And I really like that aspect of having new speakers at the conference and to have a fresh set of perspective of, all right, you may be looking at the problem A from a different technical perspective, B from a different business solution or a different use case or anything else. So getting those, even if it's just a slight tweak of perspective, is very valuable. But to do a complete turnover and having 0 repeat speakers is a remarkable achievement. Congrats on that.
Thank you.
Not that I
next
fully
year
endorse that. As somebody who's spoken at other conferences, I wouldn't mind going back to other conferences to speak. But
yeah. Well, 2020 we're gonna let some people back. Like, don't worry, we'll let some people back. I don't know about Mike, but we'll let some people back.
Fair enough.
So, what type of topics are going to be covered in the talks?
Literally everything. So, it's interesting because I tried to think about the cross section of what we do and what we haven't seen before. So like one of our speakers is covering SEO, right? Which we've seen a couple talks about SEO, but it's from a company. She works for a company that specializes in SEO. So they're going to be coming in. They're also our happy hour sponsor too. So we actually have a happy hour this year. We have 2 happy hours actually. And one of the happy hours is sponsored by Deep Crawl, and one of their folks is Ashley Bermanhale is going to be talking about SEO from an Angular perspective and how you properly handle that in a spa. Another talk that's really interesting is actually by the guy's name of Tariq, and he's going to be talking about a platform called Dora. which is AI learning to drive the testing on your platform. So how do you use artificial intelligence to write your tests for you, which is kind of scary and kind of awesome. I don't even understand it, but I want to learn. We have some folks. So Laura Ciro who's coming up from Columbia, is going to be talking about Nest, kind of doing like an intro to Nest, which, if anyone's doing Angular and you're doing Node on the back end, you probably want to start using Nest, just because it matches a lot of what we're doing. But then also we brought Camille in. So Camille, the guy who created Nest, we're flying him all the way from Poland, and he'll be doing another talk on Nest later on in the day. We have Maham, who's going to be coming up from Florida. She's going to be talking about like WebSockets and logging from your Angular application and how you can use WebSockets to do that effectively. I mean, there's literally everything. And of course, Victor and Jeff from Narwhal, like you can't forget those guys. So they're going to be coming in and doing their thing. Like I don't even know what they're going to talk on yet, but I just know it's going to be amazing. So they always do a good job.
So Camille is speaking this time, because I know he did a workshop last year, but if I recall, he didn't speak last year. But I know we were all excited to hear more on that topic. So he's speaking this year.
Yeah, he's actually speaking this year.
That's awesome.
I tried to get him to speak last year, but he's like, well, let me just come there first and see what it's like. And now he's like, yes, sign me up.
Very cool.
Yeah, I think it's
pretty that's just small. Go ahead.
I think it's pretty killer, kind of where we're at right now with the conference material and topics. It kind of feels like we've now gone beyond just the how do you do things in Angular, and now we're really into how do you solve the entire ecosystem when Angular is a part of it, right? Talking backend, SEO, search and optimization stuff, all that kind of things, and now we're kind of really getting into how are people going to make this work across the board, and that's pretty fascinating.
Yeah. Well, that's actually, I was talking with Brad Green the other day, and I was telling him one of the goals I set with the conference is try to keep around 75% of the talks to be Angular related, but then give 20 to 30% to things like mentorship and coaching and diversity or deploying to the cloud or Firebase and stuff like that. Because at least my philosophy is that we shouldn't be myopic with the way we approach things, and if we can have our conferences kind of highlight that we're just people working in tech, and there's other things we should be aware of, I think that will help make us a lot more effective.
For sure. Well, maybe that's a good segue to talking about the tech side of this whole conference and everything. I mean, we kind of mentioned all the SEO and all these things like that. These all come into play into, I'd imagine, this web platform of maintaining the stuff for your conference.
Yeah, absolutely. So last year was our first year, and I think everyone, the first time they try to do something, screws up every way possible. And we did that. So at first I was like, oh, let me just set up this basic Angular CLI app and deploy it to GitHub Pages, because that would be easy. And at the time it was actually a really good module for it that was part of the CLI. Then it got removed from the CLI. So that happened. I don't know who removed that. I'm gonna look at Brocky, but it's probably not his fault. And then so we did that, and it was working great, but the hard part was that, okay, now I have all this hard-coded data that requires that I do a push to my code base every single time I want to update something. So I was like, okay, well, let's maybe use a CMS. Okay, well, what CMS do I use with Angular? And I don't know, a lot of folks that went last year met Bram, and we were like, hey, he's got this CMS that has this really cool Angular front end. It's doing all kinds of cool stuff with oh gosh, I forget what it's written on, but like it was really nice. And I'm like, well, let's try using this.
It was Node and Loopback, I think.
Yeah,
Loopback.
Yeah. It was Loopback. Yeah. I'm like, this sounds like cool tech. So let's try and use this. And we started moving everything to the CMS, and that's when I talked to Nathan. I was like, hey, Nathan, can you like write a conference app for us? And so I started talking to Nathan, and we started going down that path. But then like halfway through, we realized that CMS is hard. Like trying to get all your data to CMS is hard. How do you sync that? And then also, I was talking to Valor Software. I'm like, our website is ugly. We need to redesign it. And we redesigned it, and we ended up building it in Webflow because we didn't have time to rebuild it in Angular. Because the designer just did it in Webflow and made it easy. And that caused even more issues because now we had data sync issues because some of our data was in Comena, some of our data was in Webflow, and then we tried to integrate our ticket platform for the badge scanning, and now we have data in our ticket platform. So like all of these things together, and then we changed our schedule. So like I don't remember how late, Nathan, how late were you awake trying to change and update our schedule in the app?
It was kind of a nightmare, and really we got started pretty late, so it was a rush. The Android app sucked. It was terrible. You know, and it was difficult.
Who wrote that? No.
Last minute decisions, for sure. And I think we were literally even deploying while the conference was going, which was just insane.
Yeah, I remember there was one of our sponsors last year. We only had one sponsor that had an Android phone. Everyone else had iPhones, and the sponsor came to us and like, well, the badge app isn't working, and we're like, well, why isn't it working? And they're like, well, I have an Android phone, and I'm like, okay, well, why doesn't that work? So we did what 2 or 3 deployments in the middle of the conference of the app. Like that's hard.
And it was still bad. I mean, the problem, we had some timing issues, animation timing issues. On top of that, the iteration of NativeScript at that time with a root side drawer wasn't good for performance on Android and the V8 engine. So there were just problems. Wasn't good.
Yeah. Well, and then we also ran into issues. One of the things that we built into the app was badge scanning. And like you could claim your badge and then put your information in. And like one of the things I'm really cautious about with ngAtlanta is like not giving away our attendees' information, right? So like we don't sell the information for any attendees. And the only way the sponsors get your information is if you let them scan your badge. So it's like explicit consent. You say, yes, you can have my information, scan my badge. And I think as an attendee, I appreciate that. But the complexities of they reinstall the app or we push an update and now they try to scan a badge that's already claimed. Like I remember, us having to go and tweak the database manually to unclaim badges just so people could reclaim their badge. Like that was a mare. But we learned.
So this badge app you're talking about, this was a mobile app, and you mentioned NativeScript.
Yeah.
Built in NativeScript that would then scan using what? The phone's camera?
Yeah, there was a barcode scanner, and it actually was a barcode scan. It wasn't exactly just the camera, but pretty much a view that you could scan the badge, and then we'd take the badge and we'd validate that with the TITO data for the conference, and then if it was valid, we would actually authenticate the user based on that badge. And it worked well for iOS, and of course, being last minute, we focused most of our development efforts on iOS. So it makes sense that Android was terrible. Now this year, I will say, I just got off a really exciting call with Mike Hardington, and we are going to do an Ionic PWA conference app using Ionic 4. And actually, we already have it wired to the conference data now. So this year, there will be a PWA. So for those that want to just access the schedule easily without getting into an app that can do that very easily, we'll probably still update the apps as well with the barcode scanning feature. I'm not sure if we'll do the barcode scanning in the PWA yet, but maybe.
Yeah. Well, that's a good segue because like this is getting into year 2, right? So this year we're like, hey, we like using the CMS. There was benefits from using a CMS. Let's try using a CMS again because we like pain. And we decided to go with Type, which for those of you who know Patrick JS, him and his crew with the Y Combinator, they're in there right now, and they started this company called Type, which is a headless CMS. And I told Patrick, like, hey, will you let us use this? Would you encourage that? And we got on board with using type, and that worked out really good. And we started building out our UI and all this stuff. But then some of the data structures and some performance and caching and all this other stuff, we started running into issues. And I'm like, well, let me just start hard coding stuff because that's easy. So I started hard coding stuff again. And at first, like, that's much faster, right? I don't have to go to a CMS and like drag and do all this craziness to get things to work. And I can just hard code it. Well, that's great the first time you're trying to add something to a schedule. But then when you have to tweak the schedule and you have to tweak a value in every single number in every entry on every day on the schedule to get it to line up, it's like, okay, now hard coding hurts. Like, I don't want to do this again. But then you just keep doing it. And so now we're trying to figure out, okay, how do we get this information extracted? And now we start looking at Firebase. So that makes it harder for the mobile app too, right? Because now, how's the mobile app going to get access to the schedule if it's all hard coded in a TypeScript file, right? So good. That's a good one for Nathan. Like, how are you going to get that out?
Well, no, it's terrible. It's not a great way to do it. I think we even had some images hard coded last year. There was definitely some hard coded things there, and luckily this year I think we can get away from all that. So the structure this year is all Firebase, Firestores, Firebase functions, and all that can be administrated through material design, front end, back end for Zach. And actually, Zach hasn't even seen this yet, but we'll try to have that deployed, and then that can be used to populate the schedule and everything else.
That would be easy.
So is it?
Yeah, I'd like to see that.
So,
yeah, actually, we might show that.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
No,
Live demos, that's always safe.
Let me get it running. You guys go ahead. Let me get it running here, and then I'll share it.
I have a question. Is it? Are you talking like moving all that data from the CMS into Firebase and using that, or is it going to be a mix of those two for different parts of data?
I think we'll probably have to move everything except the ticket information from Firebase or from the CMS and hard coding into Firebase if we want it to be accessible everywhere.
Yeah, so that's actually a good question. And Zach, I'd say with the CMS data, really, if it's just used on the website, I don't know if we'll need to consume that CMS data or if you want to merge those. But yeah, we could talk about that later.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and that because like that's the. Go ahead.
Yeah, that becomes the balance as you're looking at putting together a system or a platform or multiple platforms. Is the idea of, all right, that's fine. You have some content, maybe it's speaker bios or a schedule or anything else. That's stuff that potentially could be static or dynamic. To be able to determine, all right, does it make sense to store everything in the same place, or is there something that's just website specific? That doesn't necessarily need to be dynamic and pulled from a dynamic store to host on multiple places.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because like as we were having this discussion, I was like, man, this is just like my day job. Like at work, we're having this same discussion of we just bought a new platform. How do we get the data into our other platforms? How do we we just got a native script app and now we have a PWA from Ionic. Like these things are not the same. They don't have the same data stores. Like, how are we going to manage this? And so like, even in the conference circuit, we still have the same struggles as everyone else.
Yeah, I want to dive a little bit deeper into that whole the CMS and data kind of concept real quick. So if we're talking, when we think about like in terms of the content that's stored in those things, we need to get them to our Angular applications, right? We have something like Firebase, we have data and strings of data or whatnot, or JSON objects, and we get that there, and that's kind of straightforward. Like, what is the thing that goes? We say now we need like a CMS. Like, what is the CMS providing? Is it stuff like I've got rich text that somebody needs to edit on a bio, and that's the content that I want to get over? And then how is that, what are the challenges that presents to if it's structured data, structured display data that's in a CMS, like how do we work with that in Angular and those sort of things?
The kind of the driver for me was the pain around trying to manage the sessions. Not user sessions, but like the talk sessions. and then how that ties to the speakers and the speaker bios, and some of the speakers have workshops, and how do you get all of these things that are structured and related data. How do I get all of those to tie together really easily without having to like manually hard code a bunch of IDs, right? Go ahead.
So I think also another thing that goes into consideration, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is the technical abilities of your users. You're a developer. So if I say, hey, you need to update content, you feel comfortable with logging directly into Firebase/Firestore to be able to update some data. But if there is somebody who is managing a conference who may not necessarily have development experience or is as comfortable in that type of environment, then a more structured, a more paved path of a CMS that gives you inline editing abilities may be the route to go. So does that play into the fact of your choices and availability of choices?
Absolutely, right? Because I can't be the one to do everything all the time. I need to have people helping me. Oh wow, that site looks amazing. Sorry, Nathan just put up the website for the admin. I'm like, oh, that looks cool. Hey, let's not make sure we overshare with this too. By the way, don't show our actual attendee raw data.
There's actually no real
Okay,
data in here
let's not show our API keys for the ticket system.
Mainly because you have not even seen this yet, so we need you to enter in the real data.
Okay.
But the cool thing, this is actually not even the front end consumable piece. This is actually just to administrate the back end. So this is from Borgrave. I always say Borgrave, but it's Borgrave.
Where does he live right now?
Colombia, I believe.
Okay.
Basically, and this is wired to Firebase, and he's using Firestore to get these collections. And then these same collections will actually be consumed by the Ionic PWA app here. So this would be the consumable side of this. And now we just actually got off a call this morning about this. So this is all brand new, and I hope Mike doesn't mind me showing this. But he had shared this conference app setup just a couple days ago, I think. But yeah, so we're going to wire this up to the same setup, and so we actually have it all living now inside of this repo. So a little thing on last year, it was around this time, October, when Norwal, you guys, Justin introduced NX, and around that time, I think, is when Zach and I were working through a couple details, and so I was really pushing him to use NX at that time because he did want to do all these aspects like he's talking about. He wanted to, there needed to be a back end facility to kind of administrate the data. There's the CMS side, there's this app side for the attendees to consume, and then these apps we were doing. So we were I was pushing for NX at that time, and I think in the end we did end up using NX for some of it, but we weren't taking advantage of much of it last year. So this year, really, we're trying to take full advantage of the setup, and so we do have Ionic in here living next to the native script apps we're going to deploy, next to the administrative app, and everything is all here this year.
Nice.
And so, yeah, this Ionic app is actually going to be consuming the same Firestore services and everything that the admin app is consuming, that also the native script app is consuming.
And then do you have Angular components that are used across all of those? I would say maybe the following year, a year out, we might do that, given the time span, because again, we are crunching this again this year. Hopefully it won't be as crazy as last year, because we do have some things together. But next year we could do some refactoring and do some more broader sharing component wise. But probably this year it'll just be services, models, and that sort of thing. And so then really all of these apps are all Angular powered apps?
That's right. Yeah, everything. This is for sure. Angular is providing the facility to do this in a really nice, cohesive way, for sure.
And I took a little peek the other day at the old view source on the ngAtlanta website. It looks like Angular 7.1 is on that thing.
Yeah. Living on the edge. No, so we definitely it's up there. We're also using Angular Universal and Nest. So we have a API proxy going, and basically what that is, it's a little bit of a Nest and Node proxy that goes back, and that actually makes the calls to type. And it offers a little layer of abstraction, somewhere to put all my type API keys and all that stuff. So I'm not putting that on the front end and calling it directly. So it's a little bit more secure of an application. And then on top of that, eventually I was hoping to get to the point where I could add some caching. But when I added caching, it also broke things. So, because I didn't add caching the right way. And part of that challenge was we were updating the data in the CMS, and then not cache busting correctly. So that I basically just had to rip out caching, at least for the time being. But we are using it for compression, which is really important.
Yeah, that whole cache busing and dynamic content always a challenge, right?
Yeah, we tried doing service workers, but that did not go well for a couple of days.
All right, really living on the edge. Hey, what about like search engine optimization and social sharing and stuff like that? You mentioned you're using Universal. Like, how much did you guys get into that?
We got into a little bit with the performance side of it, but actually the interesting thing was around the search engine stuff. I actually spent more time with the meta tags and the structured data for the site and getting that to show up correctly, and then also with some of the webmaster tools that Google has, um, to begin to kind of help get that populated correctly. Because if you search for ngAtlanta, you do end up getting a page with some decent structured data on the search results. So I made sure that we did that because I wanted us to at least be searchable. Um, but then we also did some other stuff around the meta tags. Like there wasn't too much that we did, partially because I know nothing about it and I'm waiting to see the talk in a couple weeks.
And then what about like social sharing or anything like that? If you want to like deep link and share a link to one of the talks or anything like that, do you have any stuff like that, or are they all kind of like modal overlay sort of thing?
They are links, and even to the speakers, you could deep link to the speakers. So that's a thing that already exists. That was a little bit of a challenge because we were pulling the speaker slugs from the CMS. So if you ended up with an extra space or something, you get a horrible speaker name in your title, your address bar. You end up with a bunch of %20s. Like that sounds great. Everybody loves that. Um, and also because I'm a complete noob when it comes to code, so which will say that probably won't help my speaking prospects. But the when I did the splitting the strings on the speaker names and putting dashes in, I didn't think, hey, some people might have more than one dash. So like one of our speakers' names is Ashley Birminghale. So there's 3 spaces in her name. I was, somewhat narrow-minded and thought nobody has more than 2 names. And so obviously her name has a 20% in it right now. So I need to go back and fix that when I have the time that I don't have.
I sit back and I'm thinking about what we've had so far on the show today, and it's interesting how talking about what's coming in the conference parallels to the not difficulties, but the hurdles and different technical solutions you had to get through to be able to support the conference. And there's a lot of parallels there. We talked about Nest, we talked about Angular, we talked about SEO, we talked about a few other things, and how essentially it almost sounds like, hey, an attendee coming to the conference could learn how to stand up an entire event based off of the technology that you're going to learn about at the conference.
Yeah, and you can even meet the sponsors and figure out how to get them to sponsor your conference. Right? And so that's literally everything. Like, yeah, it's funny because I just pulled up the schedule and everything that we're going. Like, even service workers is being talked about. So it's like the thing I had to rip out because I couldn't figure it out is going to be there. So it's like, okay, great. I need to. I can't organize and run a conference. I need to just sit down and learn for a couple of days.
Yeah, that's one thing that's really cool too about this, that you take it on and you're doing Angular across the board for the whole conference, is that you're getting it's really like this showcase piece that you kind of like dive into and learn from, right? Of all these different aspects like you're mentioning. Very cool.
Well, and it's like for me, it's also kind of a personal thing too, because like the whole reason that, like, not to get sentimental, like the whole reason that I got to where I am in my career today is because of the Angular community. So like having an opportunity to leverage the technology that helped me to get a job and be where I am is one thing, but then also helping that community grow and all of that is just as important. So there's a lot of love that goes into doing something like this and a lot of sleep in place. But to me, it's like I look back at the community, I look at what we're trying to do for this community, and to me, that's more important. I mean, my wife is like, why? Like last year, we lost a lot of money on the conference, which is what it is. And this year we're trying to break even. We're pushing hard. We're pushing for tickets and all that stuff. And she's like, well, why do you do it? And why do you keep working until midnight or 1 a.m. every day trying to get this conference out? And for me, it's an easy answer, but a hard answer for someone who's not in the Angular community to understand is that it's the love of the community, right? It's the seeing the people who come to an event like this. And like last year, 38% of our audience was female. Our audience. And I had someone come up to me and said to me, "I've never felt so safe at a conference before." And being a 6'2" white dude, like I can't identify with that. I'm like, what do you mean by that? How do you not feel safe at an Angular conference or a conference in general? And she's like, well, lunch was a good example. There was, more than one woman at every table in lunch, and I didn't have to worry about what table I sat at. You can sit with us. It is more than just a sentence. It is literally the embodiment of what we are trying to do. And like that's just as important as all the tech stuff we're talking about. It's creating that culture and creating that feeling of, you know what, come here, you're gonna be safe, you're gonna learn, you're gonna have a great time, and you're gonna grow in your career. And that's such an important part of what we're doing.
We talk a lot about the inclusiveness of the Angular community and what that means to people and how it helps people feel comfortable, like you mentioned, and all those things. I think another thing that it does that we don't talk a lot about, but you just kind of mentioned and hinted on it here, is that by having that comfort level, by having that unity amongst everyone, everybody feels more comfortable to share their feelings and their experiences, right? So you in this position of setting up this conference, and you talk about the passion that you've got that drives you to make this conference again and to do all this stuff and provide all this stuff, is partly driven by the fact that you're getting this response and you're hearing these things back from the community because the community feels comfortable to share that, right? And to say, this is a great spot. This is wonderful, right? And then that dialogue and that discussion happens because of this community being so open and inclusive. Because you go to other conferences, maybe it's not so much. I'm sure the attendees are enjoying things or liking stuff or liking, moments and things. But, as the conference runners, as the speakers, you don't typically hear that because that atmosphere is not there. And that's one of the benefits of this, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's fun. Like I can't express how fulfilling it is to like to see. And like I don't like, everyone talks about imposter syndrome for like their job and developing. Like I have imposter syndrome around conference organizing, right? Like, I'm so worried that everyone at the end of the day is going to think the conference is a bomb. And then, like, everyone's like, no, it's fantastic. Like, everyone's loving the conference. I'm like, oh, really? Like, I thought it was doing horrible. They're like, no, this is perfect. Like, everything's going great. And I'm like, oh, okay. I guess I'm not going to die then. It's just it's it's an odd feeling, and like we get so hung up on the tech problems and we get so hung up on the everything else, and I think we forget to realize like there's a human being that's struggling behind that app or just struggling behind that event, and like a lot of folks don't know like this is run by one or two people. It's just right now it's actually just me, my wife, and some people helping out on the app like Nathan and the folks, and Tracy's helping with, social media and this, that, and anyone I can get to like tweak on little things. But like it's just a labor of love, and I think a lot of us forget that there's sometimes, like, you look at Nest, and it's Camille and a couple other contributors that are just putting together this amazing open source software. And before you write that angry comment on how they didn't answer your issue in one day, you know think about, is this some dude or some gal that's like part-time doing something because they love it, right?
Yeah,
It's
for sure.
interesting.
For sure. We definitely heard a lot of good things about the conference last year, and I'm sure we'll hear more amazing stuff about it this year for sure. What other anything other challenging issues that came up, like Angular specific sort of things that maybe came up that you hit that you solved in doing this process, or that sort of thing?
Oh man, I think that one of the hardest parts was getting Universal to work this year, getting Universal to work with Nest. So if you think about, like, Universal is not always the easiest thing to do. And at the same time, getting it to work correctly and all that jazz. But then trying to get it to work in Nest when there wasn't really anyone doing Nest and Universal together, and figuring out how the DI works with Universal. I actually just gave up and said, Camille, help me fix it. Like, it's just, do it for me. I can't do this.
Let's give a quick rundown of what Nest is, so people may not be aware of that.
Oh yeah. So I actually just did a talk about this in Shanghai. So I got the chance to go to ngChina, which, if you ever do a talk in China, realize that Google Slides won't work, Gmail won't work, and like none of that works. So like, I want to have one of the speakers come from Google and talk. I mean, from China, and be like, yeah, we don't have access to that. They can't get to Medium. Like, Medium.com is not accessible from China. So all these blog articles that folks are writing are not accessible. So what I do is I download them as a PDF and send them to my friends in the Chinese chat app WeChat. Like, here, go translate this, and then they go repost it on a Chinese website. It's like, it is what it is. But so, like, Nest, I talked about Nest in Shanghai and at ngChina, and it's basically like, imagine if TypeScript, Node, Java Spring, and Angular all had a baby. So you get like the annotations and decorators and like stuff that you have in Spring and Spring Security. You get the dependency injection and router guards from Angular. All of it's in TypeScript, and it just sits on top of Node and Express, or you can swap out Fastly if you want. And it really adds that level of syntactical sugar on top of Node to make it like really easy to use your server, are really easy to write your server. But then if you think about it, if it's all TypeScript and you're running in a monorepo, now you can actually have your return typings on your APIs match with the typings that you have on the response objects in your Angular service. So now you know exactly what you're getting from the front end and back end. All that stays in sync. You don't have to worry about, is this really what I'm expecting? And then on top of that, it makes your builds a lot easier, because all you're having to deal with is TypeScript, right? If you know how to do TypeScript, you're good to go. And it's just the router guards, like, you could have the same kind of permissions checks in your web router guards as you have on your API router guards. Like, that sounds nice to me. That's what I want to do more often. So like that's why I go talk about it and try to evangelize for it and get more people on that path, because I saw how fun that was and how easy that was. And then the more I dug into it, the more I fell in love with it.
And did you mention dependency injection as well?
Oh yeah, yeah. The dependency injection just uses services and everything, just like Angular. So like, you would be surprised how close to Angular it looks, and that was intentional, right? Camille tried to do that, and everything's either a component, a service. Like, it matches. There's even modules, and the modules just look like Angular modules. So when Ivy comes out and modules change a little bit, uh, maybe Nest will have to change a little bit too. But that's interesting.
So that means that you could potentially not just share typing information of, hey, I'm getting back a person that has first name and last name, but essentially you could have some sort of validation service that you could run the same validation routine on the client and on the server, right? Once run
Exactly.
everywhere.
Yeah.
And that, and
so
that,
now you're on
literally, that literally could be the same service, just injected at 2 different places.
Well, and think about it too. You have native script and Ionic. You could use that same service that does validation on your mobile, your web, and your server. You're done.
I'm sold. I'm in.
Nest, that's the magic of Nest, right? Okay, so we were
Yeah.
talking about tying in with CMS and Nest and the challenges there that you hit.
So part of it was around like the structure of the data, right? So the CMS was is built around documents and folders. And like if you're not thinking about that structure as you set it up, when you try to turn that into a flattened response for your UI, it starts to become like, how many layers of maps do I need to get to the data I need? Like this is, I hate my life right now. Like I'm 3 maps in and I still don't have what I need. Like I feel like I'm doing this wrong. So there's a lot of challenges that came with that, which is why I started. In all honesty, that's why I started hard coding it, because I'm that guy that I always forget how to do a map and I have to Google it. And I'm like, oh, this is the 5th time I've had to Google how to do a map. Or, the RxJS switch to pipes. And I'm like, I forgot how to do this because I haven't touched a keyboard in a week. And like, it's just life. So I was like, oh, I'll just hard code it because I remember how to do that. And get it out the door because, I have a million other things to do. And, you got 4 kids running around the house. It's like, do I want to spend 3 days trying to build this website, or I just want to get it out the door? Which is the same trade-off we make in our jobs, right? Do you want to ship something today, or would you like to make it architecturally sound? I'm like, oh, ship today. That sounds great. Sign me up for that. That's the decision that we end up with at most of our jobs every day.
It is a balance, and if you don't ship anything, then quite frankly, you don't have users.
Well, I had somebody say, like, why isn't your schedule on the website? Why isn't your schedule on the website? I want to buy tickets, but I won't buy tickets until I see a schedule. And I'm like, I don't have the schedule because I haven't had time to spend like the 2 days it takes to put together the schedule. And I put the schedule up, I put TDB in like half the boxes. And he's like, well, how come these ones are TBD? And I'm like, well, because some of the speakers haven't gotten me their talks yet. And like, who? I'm like, I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus, but most of the most famous ones. And I'm just like, the folks who do this every day, like they haven't got me their talks yet. Well, why? Because they're doing this every day. Like they don't have time to do that always, right? So, and that's the other side that I've learned through doing this is like trying to track people down is hard, and trying to get people to do stuff is hard. Which, the fact that we're on this podcast right now shows that we can show up, and like even that's a challenge sometimes. But then you have to realize like that's how people feel when we ignore those emails and we don't respond because we're busy with our family or busy, working. And then we lose that empathy for other people when it's something that we need versus something they need. And I that's kind of been a fun reality check for me, because I'm that guy that I'll text you 3 minutes after I send a Slack message saying, hey, how come you haven't replied to me? And then, like I was trying to get a couple of speakers to be on the ngAtlanta, and every day I'm sending them a message. They're like, dude, settle down. I'm like, it's been 24 hours. How much more time do you need? Like, tell me yes or no. And then they're like, well, I'll tell you later. And I'm like, well, what's that mean, tomorrow? And, then we end up, slowly going a long time, and eventually we can answer. But like, it's easy to forget that.
Yeah. It's that, like you mentioned earlier, just kind of stepping back and realizing that we got people behind everything and all that stuff, for sure.
Yeah. And it's fun watching Nathan code at the same time too.
No, this is how last minute we are. I mean, I'm having to finish this now while you're talking.
Hey, at least you know what, we're gonna have an app again, and like I think folks like that because we had a lot of people scanning badges and like trying to get in touch with each other, and like it makes it a lot easier to connect with someone when you have something that you can scan and get their information. And you don't fat finger it, and you don't mess it up. And, that's one thing I loved about the about NG China actually, is that they have like WeChat, which you just scan a QR code and you connect with the person. Like, how much easier does that get? And it felt like the Black Mirror a little bit, but at the same time, it was kind of cool.
Cool. All right. Well, we're at the top of the hour, so we better wrap things up. Let's just mention the details about the conference really quick so people know they can get the tickets and stuff like that.
Yeah, ngAtlanta 2019. It's going to be January 9th through 12th. NGATL.org, at ngAtlanta on Twitter, at ngAtlanta on LinkedIn. It's amazing how many people are on LinkedIn and been sharing the heck out of that. We've got 2 days worth of amazing talks, 2 days of speakers, and Jenny's Ice Cream just outside the door, which everyone loved last year. And it's going to be an amazing show.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Let's do some quick picks if anybody has any picks, and then we can call it good. I didn't mention to you guys before that we do picks at the end of the show. So if you have something, you can have a pick. It could be tech related, non-tech related, or if you don't, no worries, no pressure. So just let me know. Anybody have any picks? Mike, got anything?
I don't have anything.
Come on, make Mike go last.
I gotta come up with something quick. Okay, got it. As if I didn't know this was coming.
Yeah, right. All right. Well, it's all right. We don't.
I'll drop you a little something. Real Talk JS, if you haven't heard of it, from John Papa, Dan Whalen, and Ward Bell. It's pretty fun. Really good discussions over there. So a fun podcast to check out. And also maybe Bram Borgrave, Beeman_NL on Twitter, who's doing the backend API stuff for ngAtlanta.
Cool. Those are good ones. All right. Anybody else? Are we good?
I got some. I got two. First one is I'm gonna pitch Ember, but not that Ember. Ember coffee mugs. I got one of these as a gift for running a GDG, and the Ember coffee mugs, like, it's got a heating coil in the coffee cup, and like, I've been sipping on this tea all day long and just refilling it with cold water, and I get a little push notification that says your tea's hot again. It's like, that's the coolest thing. Like, I'm nerding out over a coffee cup. And that's really cool. And then also just, I'd like to, thank everyone who's been helping with ngAtlanta. I mean, between Fowler Software, between Nathan, between Tracy Lee, between, Brocky and all the designers, and like literally everyone and all of our sponsors, like, everyone has been incredibly supportive. The Angular community in general has been really supportive, like sharing and tweeting about everything we're doing. And it's really heartwarming to see how this community is coming together. And I've really been enjoying that.
Nice. I want to say something real quick on the Ember coffee mug. We just got one of those as Google developer experts as well. And so my pro tip on that, which took me forever, and maybe it's just me, but there's a button on the bottom that you got to push in and like hold in to sync it, with the application Bluetooth sort of thing.
Yeah.
Well, you really have to push that button in. It actually like physically clicks. And I sat there holding my finger on this button and going, where the heck is the blue lights? It's not syncing. And I did this for like 20, 30 minutes, and then I walked away. I came back again, did it for like another 5. And then finally I was so frustrated that I pushed a little harder and it goes click. I'm like, oh my gosh. So you're trying to sync it and it's not flashing the lights. You really have to push that button and you want to hear it click. So there you go.
Yeah. Nice. Good advice.
All right.
I got something.
You got something. All right, Mike.
Yeah. I just went through initiation / onboarding at my new company. And one of the things they ran through was something called HBDI, which is the Herrmann Brain Dominance Instrument, which gives you insight to basically how you think and how you approach, and how you can take that knowledge of how you think and how you react to different situations to get better and empathize with how other people approach the same problem. So definitely outside of necessarily tech, but it gives you an idea of how you think and how you approach things. Very helpful. The results that I went through from my own experiences with it has definitely helped out.
So for those who Google it afterwards, what were you?
I am heavily dominant in blue, like heavily, which is more analytical type thinking. That almost outside of the boundaries of the chart.
All right.
Yeah, I had to do one of those too, and I was about as far in the yellow as possible, which is the crazy innovation brain.
Yeah.
Cool.
But on top of my pick, I wanted to say thank you to Zach for coming on today. Not just for talking about ngAtlanta, but pulling back the covers a little bit, showing us what goes on behind the scenes and the different issues that you went through to be able to get ngAtlanta up and running, both last year and this year. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. So thank you, Nathan, for coming on and sharing your time with us. Nathan, you still are screen sharing. Can we see your face?
Oh, shoot. Yes.
That's why I said we're watching you code, because we're literally watching you code.
There it is. You know, it's funny. Didn't even realize that the whole time. Hilarious. Yes. I want to say thank you to Zach too, because I know it's an enormous effort that he puts together. So thank you for all you're doing for sure. I know it's a lot of work.
Thank you.
Yes, and one more thank you for Zach for coming on and taking your time sharing it, not only the conference and everything everybody said, but also coming on ngAir and sharing your journey and stuff like that. I really appreciate you sharing your time. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for having us.
For sure. All right.
Thanks, Justin and Mike. It's good to see you guys.
Yeah. Get your tickets, go to ngAtlanta, and have a good one. Have a happy holidays. See ya.
Cheers.